2015, Marvel Studios released Avengers: Age of Ultron for international theaters. Featured in the film was a whole host of characters from the previous Avengers film and even related characters from other Marvel-related films, connecting further the Marvel Cinematic Universe at the time. But featured in the film, importantly, was the character of Helen Cho. From the film, it's explained that Dr. Helen Cho was a world-renowned and acknowledged geneticist and the leader of the Eugene Research Group. The full title of the group is called Eugene Genetics Infinite Research and Development Organization, based in South Korea, and a company specializing in regenerative tissue properties led by Helen Cho. The company was well known for its work in the development and theory of regenerative tissue, which led to the notable creation of Eugene's most prominent product, the regeneration cradle, which could create organic tissue in short amounts of time. As in part, Eugene had a small factorial development in Ultron and with Vision. Due to Eugene's research into the field of regeneration, Helen was called to the Avengers Tower by Tony Stark after Clint Barton was injured in a battle after setting up equipment in Bruce Banner's lab, a machine based on the technology of Eugene which she developed to rebuild Clint's damaged skin and saved his life within minutes of the treatment. Even an accomplished scientist as Bruce Banner remarked at how groundbreaking the Korean treatment was with relation to treated injuries, and the others remarked at the technology and skill of the regeneration. Upon a social event at the Avengers Tower, Helen stayed behind with the Avengers after many of the guests had left. During the after party, there was discussion of who among the Avengers could technically lift the hammer of Thor, but the group of them were interrupted by Ultron, whom later attacked them. After the attack, the group gathered in the lab to discuss what had happened exactly, and Helen questioned the design that Tony had built, and due to the tension with the situation, the entire group almost had arguments with one another. With the Avengers deciding to handle the threat of Ultron, Helen returned to Seoul to continue her own research. Upon returning to Seoul and later assuming that the situation with Ultron had been dealt with, Helen found that Ultron was actually waiting for her in the laboratory with Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, and explained the reason why she was left alive. Ultron used Loki's staff to control her mind and used her experience to build him a vibranium alloyed body with technology from the regeneration cradle. Wanda touched the cradle and gained a glimpse into what Ultron's true intentions were, and horrified with what actually might happen if he were to succeed with his ambitions, released Helen from the mental control and disconnected Ultron from the regeneration cradle. Nearly killed in the confrontation, she was later saved by the Avengers and was invited to work at the new Avengers facility once her wounds recovered. The character of Helen Cho was played by a Korean actress, Soo-hyun Kim, known in Western media as Claudia Kim. At the time in the early 2000s, Claudia was an up-and-coming actress in South Korea due to her appearances in Korean television. Her roles in Korean television roughly began in 2006, which was a period of almost 10 years prior to the Age of Ultron being released in 2015. At the time, it was her first serious role in a feature film, and received a decent amount of coverage within Korean media due to her having a very minor role in the Age of Ultron, but due to her being such an actress at the time, this minor role had a great deal of attention associated with it. The second Avengers film was released in Marvel Studios' second phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where the studio was rapidly developing and expanding the cinematic universe, and the Korean themes were prominent in the film on purpose. Within United States and even European-based film markets, film audiences were declining in terms of viewership. The major American production studios considered a push for Asian box office revenue, and there was an intensive focus on the Asian market. Throughout the Age of Ultron, there were many references to Asian media, and in particular Korean details, such as the prominence of a well-known, internationally respected Korean research group being that of Eugen. Eugen's research headquarters were being in that of Seoul. Prominent Korean product placement were displayed within the film, with a notable example being that of Korean Air advertisements. Helen Cho's medical procedures essentially saved Hawkeye's life. On the multiple acknowledgments of Korean medical techniques from multiple Avengers. Helen Cho being possibly interested in Thor was the main reason why she attended the celebratory party at the Avengers Tower, as without that reason there would have been no real technical occurrence to have the character associated with the Avengers. During the conversation that the others had about lifting Thor's hammer, Helen actually fell asleep. The reason for that was done on purpose because of the fact that her character didn't have any logical dialogue for a situation like that. Remaining in the Avengers Tower after the celebration, and despite the attack that Ultron did, Helen remained there the entire time, displaying how brave she was as a character. And again, the fact that Claudia Kim was a popular actress at the time, and Marvel desired to have the Asian audiences interested. Claudia Kim being there at that time with Ultron attacking was focused on that detail. She was also very prominent with questioning Tony about the program that caused Ultron to essentially exist, which was showing her as a character not being afraid to assert herself even to the legendary Tony Stark, which was a clear sign to Asian audiences that their opinions were valued with the Western audience, and in particular, a Marvel Studios audience. And at the time, these assumptions, brought about by Helen Cho, were logical. When Helen returned to Seoul, different locations were featured prominently to attract tourists to Seoul, to once again highlight the fact that South Korea was a very developed and advanced Asian society. When attacked by Ultron, she could have possibly died from her wounds, because during the film many others died from Ultron's attacks, but she did not. This would not have happened due to Helen Cho or Claudia Kim being an important detail for Asian audiences. During the battle in Seoul against Ultron and throughout the film, once again, there were details for Korean Air which were very important. Remember, tourists need to see which airline to take to Korea, so it's important for viewers to know that. At the end of the film, Helen Cho was invited to possibly become a full-time research scientist at the then new installation for the Avengers. But she was never depicted again, even for the final fight against Thanos, which involved nearly every character from every Marvel Cinematic film up until that time. With all 4 phases, Helen Cho wasn't depicted in any way. The essential throwaway character of Helen Cho was the very personification of all of these details with Marvel Studios in relation to Asian audiences or even the Asian box office of the early to mid 2000s, or even the early to mid 2010s. The fact that Eugen was an internationally known research front, known to and essentially needed by the Avengers in the film for the sake of plot, had it that it would never be mentioned again nor depicted again. The references of Korean technology, Korean medical experience, or Korean locations such as Seoul for the sake of plot in the film had it that they were never meant, at least not in that capacity seen as in the Age of Ultron. A last bit of detail mentioned is that the correlation with viewers of the film had mentioned that Helen's family name of Cho. Within Marvel Comics, the character of Amadeus Cho, whom had first appeared in comics in 2005 to a mixed reception from readers, possibly might have had the character introduced, as sources mentioned Helen Cho was the mother of Amadeus Cho, but this connection was never established within the films at the time. Sometimes a character can be forgotten because they weren't a character at all, just a corporate marketing attempt to cater to a specific demographic audience.